This is In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm Jay Daniels. Every musician owes a debt of gratitude to those who have been an inspiration or influence to them. For vocalist Vanessa Rubin, some of those mentors include the likes of Frank Foster, Barry Harris, Carmen McRae, and Tadd Dameron. She released an album featuring the music of Mr. Dameron, The Dream Is You. Of course, she shares more than just a musical connection with him. In fact, both of them called Cleveland, Ohio, home. That's where we start our conversation as Vanessa Rubin explores her family roots.
My father met my mother during the war. You know, soldier goes to island, meets island girl. My mother was a nurse then. And they met, they married. He was a soldier, she was a nurse. They met, they married, they came to the States. They had 8 children. I am the 7th of 8 children. I have 5 older brothers and 2 sisters. And I grew up in a very lively household, obviously with a lot of kids, a lot of boys, a lot of, music. My mother was a very cultured woman. So, we had records, we had a piano. She spent her time indulging us in whatever interests she thought we had or talent she thought we might have, piano lessons, drum lessons. I played flute for a while in school. Always something like that. My mother had a lot of calypso in the house. My father was a Count Basie, World War II veteran. So music from that era. My elder brothers were into modern jazz. I lived in Cleveland, so it was a little rock and roll too, coming from Cleveland, Detroit's 3 hours away. So I got the influence of Motown. So it was just a grand mixture, really a really extensive potpourri of musical influences. But academia was definitely highly stressed in my house. When I went to school, graduated from college after journalism school and came home, and I started a master's degree in public administration. My mother was like, they wanted me to get a master's or a PhD and be a lawyer or some kind of executive. And I came home one day and told her that I think I want to pursue singing jazz as a jazz singer. My father was like, he was already kind of in his last days, but my mother was, they were a little taken back, but she didn't discourage me. And I was already a college graduate and felt like if this was something I wanted to do, I couldn't expect them to then, get behind that and finance that, So I taught school taught English because that was the closest degree I could get, teaching license that I could get with a degree in journalism. And, I worked and supported myself and got myself into the business, singing, working during the day, singing at night, networking, so forth and so on. And left and went to New York in 1982. I went to school at Ohio State University. I graduated from there and I came back to Cleveland for a couple of years where I discovered, I wanted to do this music thing. So I stayed here for a couple of years developing that. And when I thought I had gotten to the point where I wanted to test it out in a place where I thought all the greats lived, I left and went to New York. So, and then hence my, years began around 1982 in New York, where I moved there, worked in the public school system for about 10 years, really more than 10 years, but full-time 10 years, and discovered a passion for dealing with young people, because I really didn't grow up wanting to be a teacher, but I loved the engagement, sometimes helping at-risk youth, and singing at night until the dream is, you sing, you develop. I was trying to do in New York what I had done in Cleveland, but I also was trying to record. And about 10 or 11 years later, I was able to get the attention of someone at RCA through the help of the great Steve Coleman. I always have to give him credit for that, because without Steve Coleman, I would not have gotten the attention of Steve Backer and Novus, the label Novus, who was recording under the RCA label, putting out records, RCA Novus. It was the Novus label. Steve Backus owned that label, and Steve Coleman was recording on that label too at the time. So he with the help of Steve Coleman, I was able to get the attention of Steve Backer. And then, I started my recording career and kind of transitioned over full time into doing that. But I always maintained a teaching license because occasionally, when I've had like lulls, I still would enjoy going into the classroom and talking about life, my career, or covering a teacher's curriculum, whatever, they may have left. So, kind of keeps my eye, one foot in music and one foot in, in average everyday world, with kids and everything. So it was cool.
If I can ask about your parents, this is a question I don't normally ask, but I'm very interested in this with you. What were some of the personality traits of your parents, and do you think that you inherited some of those?
Sure. My father was fiercely independent, and I certainly have that quality. I'm a take charge, do for yourself as much as you can type. Hard for me sometimes to accept help, but I do, obviously, and glad for the opportunity to accept help in some areas that I needed, because nobody gets through life without somebody helping them do something ever so small. It was nothing but just mentoring, or giving you advice on something. My mother was that way too, worked all her life. She was a very loving individual, very affectionate. I think I definitely took that from my mother as well. But I'm a lot like my father. I take a lot. I am my mother's child. I'm not hard, and but I'm a lot like my father. Very stern, and I believe in earning one's way. That's that era he came from. Earning one's way, and that stick-to-itiveness type of thing. My mother was a little more, easy about things. My father was the disciplinarian, and my mother was the one who would be like, "Oh, come on, let the kids." She was the softer side. So, I take my humor from my mother. My mother loved humor, loved to laugh, jokes. Definitely, I take that from my mother, and the whole lively side of life. I take that from my mother. My father was a provider. He comes from the South. It was hard in the South, and coming up here and making opportunities for himself, raising 8 children with an 8th grade education. He worked in the post office until he retired. The man did great things with what he had as a man, because of the type of individual he was. So I definitely take that from my dad. But the lighter side, the fun side, the more adventurous side, definitely comes from my mother.
When you arrived in New York in the early 80s, in particular, there were 2 men who served as mentors to you. They're specifically mentioned in your biography. There was saxophonist Pharoah Sanders and the great Barry Harris, who, up until last year was still offering lessons every single week here in New York.
Yeah, I started out going to Barry Harris's Cultural Theater. He had a place up on 23rd and 8th Avenue. And I would go there because I knew you could network there. Barry was giving music lessons there. But more so than Pharoah, it would be Frank Foster. I won't take anything from Pharoah, because Pharoah was like a big jazz icon to me. And he at the time had a drummer working for him that was from my hometown, whom I knew, Mr. Greg Bandy. And Greg introduced me to Pharoah. And Pharoah knew I was a little singer trying to come up. And Pharoah let me come and sing one song on his gig every night at the Vanguard. One week he was there. And I was, had never, when you know about the history of the Vanguard and all the people that worked the Vanguard, the spirits of all the individuals who remain in the Vanguard, it's kind of very humbling, and scary too. And also because Leon Thomas would come in and sing with him. And, and I didn't want to follow somebody like Leon Thomas, but I would sing he would let me come in and do the Easy Living, this ballad. And I loved it. But I was always very grateful to Pharoah for that. And, you know, I was struggling up there in New York those couple of years. And at the end of the week, he gave me a little money for coming in there. And I was like amazed because I never expected that and ever so grateful. But it was a type of acknowledgement and a type of encouragement that getting it from somebody like Pharoah, you know, you couldn't pay for that. You just couldn't. But when I was going to Barry Harris's cultural theater, Barry was there, and Barry would have other people, you know, coming in and stopping by. And Frank Foster used to teach classes in there as well. So as well as attending some of the classes that Barry had, I would sit there during some of Frank's classes, and then hence developed a relationship with him that allowed me to then also sing occasionally with Frank's big band, which was the Loud Minority. That was his big band that featured a lot of his original writing and tunes and so forth. And that was just extremely exciting because I had such high respect for Frank Foster, and anything, you know, that he had to say, pamphlets. I still have some of the original handwritten pamphlets that he would give out during the class, and half of that stuff was way over my head at the time, but it didn't matter. I still use those as teaching materials. When I go and do like a clinic, if there's something in there that I want to emphasize, I'll whip that fella out and just say, in the words of Frank Foster, and to me, that's like the Bible. You're not going to really like debate that because he is a jazz master. And I mean, he grew up in it, knowing it, helping to create it. And, you know, it is on their shoulders, people like Frank, like Barry, and so many other people on whose shoulders I stand. So whatever knowledge that or little piece of information that I got from them that I can impart to any other student, whether they be an instrumentalist or a vocalist, I'm happy to do it, because that's the only way you're going to get it. So much of jazz history is vocal as well. It's not just all about the books. It's nice. You know, it's great to have it in the books, but when you get it from people who were there or got it from somebody who was one of the people that helped create this art form, that's better than any book you could ever get.
And the one thing that struck me immediately upon listening to your latest album, there are vocalists who stand in front of the orchestra or the band, and they almost see themselves as separate. There's the vocalist, and then there's the band. What struck me from the very first track, Lady Bird, off this album, is that as a vocalist, you see yourself and the performance that you give off, you are a part of the band. You are another instrument. Yeah.
Every artist is. I mean, I realize we're singers and people like vocals. So it's all right to come out and sell it that way. But if you don't have a great band, I don't care how great your vocals are, you got to have a great band. Like Sarah said in one industry magazine, a band will make or break a singer. I have to have great players. I try to surround, one of my things I always tell students is surround yourself in excellence. Because see, I too was not a member of, I didn't come out of like Berklee School of Music or some conservatory or something like that, but I don't even know if I would have gotten it the same way. But like just recently saw a clip of Chick Corea saying the same thing. If you listen to all of the people that he came up playing with and learning from, he said, yeah, well, you know, I came out of the institution of, and then he mentioned that person's name, or the institution of la, 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 la. Okay, so some singers, you know, well, some people came out of the Count Basie, the institution of Count Basie. That was their institution. Or the Duke Ellington, institution, or everybody that I think took time and spent time with me. So yes, I attended some Frank Foster classes. I attended some, and these classes were not one day. This was over a period of time. Barry Harris, Mr. Kurt Lightsey. I spent a lot of time with him. Paul West and Kenny Barron who embraced me, early on when I first came there and did some gigs for me, with me, Mr. Grady Tate. I'm naming names. These are people that, I made it my point to get to know. And if I did nothing else, spend time I couldn't always work with them. They weren't always available to be in a band with me, but they would spend time with me off the bandstand. And, Carmen later on, I mean, it wasn't like me and Carmen would visit each other at home, but after we got to know each other, she had spent, some time with me, talking to me about music, the music business, even inviting me to sit in on her bandstand one evening at the Blue Note, which totally blew my mind. Nancy was very gracious. Nancy Wilson was very gracious to me and actually allowed me to come and sit in on her bandstand on more than one occasion. And I've had several long talks with her over the years. So sometimes, it wasn't always about music. A lot of it is about life and music and life. You can't separate the two. So I was playing music and networking and singing with whoever I could and running people down. But I was also having time with people off the bandstand, having breakfast, going to dinner, hanging out with them. Shirley Horn was very kind to me, very encouraging. Had a chance to go to her house one night, sit at her grand piano and sit up there and sing with her. And this is just a private event at her house. Sit with her and some of her oldest friends, and they were older than her. At that time, she was about 72, maybe, in her house with her house coat on and her turban. And I mean, it's just very, it ain't about being on stage and dropping names or anything, just that personal, connection. Etta Jones, who was nice, great, embraced me, came and did, recorded with me on a CD I did called Girl Talk. So many, but yet to me, I wish there could have been more. I wish there just could have been more that I could have had access to, that I would have loved, Billy Eckstein, when he used to come and play in New York. I made it my business to be at one of those venues, to be in there, to listen to what they sung, listen to their stories, write down things they would say. Joe Williams, same thing. Anytime, Betty Carter, like that was my job, to be there, to absorb. I wasn't friends with all of them. I ain't gonna tell you that. And, we was calling and being girls, but some of them did allow me in on a couple of occasions and sometimes on more than one occasion. So I took that and ran with it and was very grateful and humble about it.
I just like to hear you sit and tell these stories all day. I'm telling you. man, it's a lot. But, my story, there are so many stories, a lot of these books, jazz anecdotes and all that kind of stuff. Tony Bennett's biography, Billie Holiday's biography, Miles's biography. I got a lot of them back here. I mean, a lot of those books are full of those stories, and I love those stories. That's so much a part of the music for me, which is why I guess the thing I really love about singing is the storytelling, the storytelling of it all, and that's it, because that is what allows for a story to take life, life itself, having the life, living the life, and having those stories to bring to everything that you're doing. And so, but the actual doing, the universities of everybody I ever studied and sung with, before I left Cleveland, I had a fantastic organ trio that I wish I could have left and came to New York with, a guy by the name of Sam Blackshaw. I used to work with a guy that's still here, fantastic organ player, Eddie Backus Sr., who still lives here in Cleveland. I came up singing with Eddie Backus when I first started singing, going to jam sessions. And he never left Cleveland. And he has spawned a lot of people's music careers here. But I had a guy by the name of Sam Blackshaw, who was an organ player that I really formed a musical marriage with. And when I said musical marriage, those that have had that with somebody know what I'm talking about. We
were so intuitively connected to each other when we would perform together. So that band, hey, I graduated from the University of Sam Blackshaw, on Hammond B3. Yes, before I even got to New York and met Mr. Willie Smith, who was, people that are from here know who these giants are, who were from the eras of jazz way before me, who knew Tadd Dameron and worked with Tadd Dameron, who is also from Cleveland, Ohio.
I believe this is one of the albums you released for Novus. It was an album that you released in 1994, the same year that Carmen passed away. Actually, a tribute album called I'm Glad There Is You. Why? I mean, you've mentioned so many women, especially, who were special to you, important to you. Why record an entire album for tribute to Carmen McRae?
Because the record company, guess that was the time of tributes. And the record company asked me to do a tribute record. Selling records is all about having a hook too. You know what I mean? So if you do a tribute to somebody that's already large, they can kind of jump on their bandwagon too, if you know what I'm saying. And I think I was asked to do one to Ella. I didn't want to do a tribute to Ella. And there were already some really great tributes. And Dee Dee had already done a tribute to Ella, got a Grammy for it, I think. And I know she got a Grammy for it, but I felt like I didn't feel that close to Ella. I felt if it was somebody I wanted to do a tribute to, it was somebody I wanted to feel really special about. And that girl, Patty Austin, Lord, when it comes to doing Ella, Patty is such a awesome singer. And when it comes to doing Ella, she's just one of the best at it too. So I said, by the time I was doing that, I was really trying to feel like who I really felt closest to. And I felt I could do a better job with Carmen because I had begun to more deeply appreciate the art of telling a story. And Carmen is just like quintessential in that area. And so I chose Carmen because, I look back at that album now, I guess the artist I was then, I felt like, I did a good job with it. But if I had to do that record over, half of them tunes I probably would not choose. I would choose something different to sing because I'm different now. And it's hard to do a tribute to her in one album because of the expanse of her career and the impact of her career on not just instrumental music, but vocal music. And her repertoire was so deep. It was like, like she was a standard bearer, but her standards were always things that people necessarily wouldn't ordinarily sing. Like she could cover something by Duke, which was fine, but she was going to find something else in an obscure piece that you weren't going to hear from every singer. And she was just fantastic like that. She knew how to, pick material and pick lyrics that had a lot of meat on them, And the Bergmans are some of the most greatest songwriters there ever were. And she'd pick tunes like that with those lyrics that you really have to have a sense of some grown-up stuff about you, some life in order to make words tangible. The aspect of believability is what she would say, because she was quite an actress too in her delivery, I believe. And so that's why I chose Carmen. And if I had to do it again, she would again be the one that I would choose. Well, her and another lady by the name of Irene Reed. There's her and Etta. Irene Reed and Etta is somebody I would love to do a project for together because they were such good friends, but they were so, as vocalists, strong. I felt never really got to do that they deserved, but just had such a big impact on vocals, and at least for me. But yeah, Carmen that's why I ended up doing that, because the record company said, do Ella. And I said, no, I'm not going to do Ella. I'm going to do Carmen. And I was glad about that record because I was able to send it to her before she passed. It's nice to be able to smell the roses. I don't know if she liked it or not. I never really heard from her in those days, but at least it was my way of just saying, I love you and I appreciate, everything you've ever done. And I will try to take some of that and go forward with it and hopefully influence other singers to embrace, vocal jazz or just good singing, period. Because she was just all the way around an excellent musician.
And there was one thing that you said in thinking about the last album that you did. You mentioned Tadd Dameron, and that was the project that you released in 2019. It's already been 2 years ago. But the one thing you said, I hope to do for Tadd's music
what Carmen did for Monk. And you know what that meant? And I don't know if people really got that, but see, really, when Monk, as Carmen said, did not write music really for vocalists. He didn't have vocalists in mind when he wrote those tunes. And those tunes, a lot of them did not have words. It's not till, John Hendricks and somebody else and them, they wrote lyrics for a lot of those tunes. They're not really that, singable melodies like the Gershwins and Jules Stein and, some of those beautiful, Mancini type standards. Somebody like Carmen, she was perfect for that project. And she made Monk's music singable. She made it sound easy, actually. But those intervals that Monk write in his music, Carmen just, because she was a pianist and would sing that anyway. She would sing that, improvise that way in her own stuff, in her own interpretation of music. So she opened his music up. I said that in a way because she opened the Monk catalog up wide for people to enjoy, not just listening to, but they could sing it. And language does that. Okay? People could now sing Monk. People could never sing Monk before with lyrics. Ruby, my dear. You know what I mean? Da-dee-dee, okay. Well, Tadd didn't write like Monk the same way. Tadd was more inside, if I could put it that way. But Tadd had a lot of vocal stuff beyond If You Could See Me Now and Lady Bird and Good Bait that a lot of people didn't know about. So I wanted to open, his music up wider for more vocalists to sing. I wanted to make his vocal library more popular than it was in the past. So singers would then, like Carmen, singers, because of such a fantastic job she did with Monk, singers now are singing Monk. It's hip to sing Monk. Well, I wanted to be hip to sing Dameron. So here are the tunes. I didn't want to recreate the wheel. I just wanted to introduce a group of songs by Tadd, some of which you may know, but other rare and new ones that you vocalists didn't know about at all. And so it took me some time to research and find some of those songs to do. And there were others that, some I liked better than others, obviously. I could have included more, but those are the best 10 or so that I thought would be easy for people to digest and learn to love, because Tadd loved melody. I love melody. He loved pretty songs. I love pretty songs. And he loved swing. So it was a good, it was like a good hookup to me. He liked swing. I love swing. It had to be pretty. I love it to be pretty. So it was like a no-brainer for me.
How do you think working on this album, and it's certainly, these are not easy compositions for vocalists. I listened to some of the runs, some of the progressions. How was it most challenging to you? But also, how do you feel it helped you to grow as a vocalist? And I think also in the realm of your knowledge of Tadd Dameron, how do you feel it helped to deepen your insight of his music when you had to work with it so closely?
Well, because I got to sing more of his music. I mean, I never used to sing that much Dameron. You know, I've been singing If You Could See Me Now for a long time, and I branched out into Good Bait. And I mean, Lady Bird, it doesn't have a whole lot of lyrics. So like, what you gonna do with it after you do that? And I didn't want to be something I'm not. You know, I still wanted it to be authentically me, but I've always loved solis, because you were going back to that whole thing about being part of the band, you know, and I've had solis written for me by before on other albums by Mr. Cecil Bridgewater, who I work closely with. You know, he's a dear friend, and he has conducted and produced projects with me. And he's a great horn player, you know, and he knows how to write big band stuff. So, you know, I like interacting with the horns that way. So I got Frank to write me that soli. I didn't know it was going to be like all that. When I got it, I went like, ooh-wee, I got to get busy learning this, because I'm not going to be standing up here reading this in the recording session. So performance I'm very performance dependent. I call it that way. And the bandstand is my classroom, because that's the way I learn, by going to places and sitting in and learning, excelling, crashing and burning, you know, right on the bandstand. And that's kind of how I came up. And so I don't really treat record dates that way, because of course I have to prepare for that. But in the preparation of a record date, you have to learn. Learning makes you grow. It broadens your ear, your spirit. It deepens your understanding of what a tune is, you know, especially if it's something you haven't had a chance to really tour with and sit with every night, you know, but you can still appreciate the value of it. Like, Whatever Possessed Me. Oh, I love that song. Came from the Blue. And I think I discovered that on the Most Important Jazz Album of 1965. That was the name of it, by the trumpet player that knew Tadd. His name is escaping me now. And he's a trumpet player and a singer. And I said, oh, that's such a beautiful song. You're a joy, just a joy. And I love ballads. You know, anytime you go with something that you don't know, or is unfamiliar, and you have to perform it, you're going to grow. You have to grow. You have to, because then it becomes a part of who you are, and it's something new. And then if you have something like that soli that you have to sit there and look at, you have to internalize it. You have to read it. You have to see the notes. You have to learn the figures. You know, you have to get the intervals right. Then when you get in the rehearsal, you're not just singing the notes, you're interacting with the horns. So then you have to blend with the horns. You got to attack the lines like a horn player attacks the line. You know, you have to actually emulate horn. It's not like you ain't out there by yourself, you know. You know what I mean? And so you're not reading all of that. So I'm internalizing. I have to internalize it so that I can put it back out in time to make the recording happen. It's a classroom for me, and I absolutely love it, which is why this COVID thing has taken me, I'm out of my comfort zone, because I'm out of my classroom, and I'm at home doing things by myself, which is kind of weird, because I never really learned music that way. I mean, I could practice, but it doesn't make sense until I actually get with someone and put what I'm doing up against what somebody else is doing. And then, you know, whatever gets created out of that, because it's not a solo thing for me at all. That's what, going back to what you said about the band.
Yeah.
You know, it's all right to have a great band, but, you know, I got to have a good band so that I can continue to be a good singer.
By the way, Chet Baker, I think, is
Chet Baker. That's who it was.
I didn't know the album, but I looked it up while you were talking, and yeah,
most
Chet
important
Baker.
jazz album of 1965. How about that?
But it's a funny thing because I was going to ask this anyway, and you set up my next question perfectly, talking about the classroom. And we said at the beginning of this, even if you are not in a classroom, you're always sharing, you're always teaching, you're always imparting something. And I think about some of those teens that you were talking about, the troubled youth, as you put it earlier. And you never know what people are bringing with them when they come to listen to this album. You know, I like to think of it as going to a jazz club, say on a Friday night. When you look at the audience, there are so many stories with each of those people in the audience. You don't know what they're bringing with them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they all come together to hear you, to hear your performances, and to hear you share that gift of music and to learn something from it. Whether they're listening to your Tadd Dameron album or a future project or what have you, how do you hope that your music helps to not only enrich, but also to enlighten the sense of musical appreciation within your listeners?
Ted, for example, my albums are loaded with fantastic players, not just me singing. If you just look at the people that are on the records, if you like alto, you would like to be the alto player, okay, you could put on one of my records, you could listen to me, but Antonio Hart is on there, Frank Foster is on there, Cecil Bridgewater is on there. You know what I mean? If you like, when you pick up the Dameron record, I'm educating you too, because you're learning, you're reading about Tadd Dameron, which you may not have known that much about. That's why I have thorough liner notes in there for people, which are hard to read now, but they're there. Also, there are, if you are into arranging, I didn't arrange those pieces. The jazz masters arranged them. Benny Golson arranged. Frank Foster did several arrangements. Bobby Watson did an arrangement. You know, Willie Smith did an arrangement. So you can check just them out. Aside from me, they have a whole history. You know, you can just take one person and just keep going and then touch other people in jazz through their careers. You know, so it's just loaded with a lot of stuff that you can gravitate to, take, and run off with. I did a gig last week, a little live stream in Cleveland. A woman came in. We had no audience. I don't know. I didn't see the woman come in or leave. But whatever time she was there for that little set that I was doing, she left and came back and left me a note. And the note was more valuable than any money I might have done during the night, because whatever she heard just kind of blew her away, but it affected her in such a positive way. And I wrote on Facebook what that meant. So I'm saying, for me, singing, there's music and there's the business of music. Okay, if you're in the business of music, you got to deal with all the business aspects of it. But then there's just music. And I'm just a medium for something that belongs to the creator. So if I do something that makes somebody feel good in that moment, uplifts your spirit, changes the human condition, moves the human condition to a better place by singing a note or telling a story or whatever it is, then I'm doing what the music was intended. I'm not there to judge myself or just to determine how valuable it is or what it isn't. That's for the listeners to do, because oftentimes you don't know who's listening. You don't know what kind of impact you're having on people. I don't know what this Dameron CD will do. Maybe 50 years from now, after I'm dead and gone, somebody might say, oh, this was one of the most incredible. You know, you see it all the time with movies and books that people write. Suddenly it's relevant and it's so much more important in other ways to people later on. And I just hope that, you know, that it is a welcomed addition to anybody's collection of music that they already have. There's a lot of Tadd Dameron instrumental albums because his discography is wide, way before me, Dameronia or anybody that ever did Dameron, plus Tadd stuff himself. But there's not a lot of there. This was the first all vocal Dameron collection ever done. So I may not be the best, but I'm the first. We'll see what comes after this.
Truly a pleasure to speak with Vanessa Rubin. Be sure and visit her website. The address, vanessarubin.com. We'll be looking forward to her next project in the near future. Special thanks to Vanessa and also to you, our listener, for joining us this week. Until we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels. You've been listening to In Studio from Simply Timeless.